I now call this committee of the whole of the Davenport Community School Board of Directors to order. The first item on the agenda is snow days. I will turn it over to Superintendent Schneckloff.
We all are.
What's that? Repeating.
Actually, it's the sound coming through that So, Gene, Strand, Maiden, and Genesis, we have our shot clinics that are up and running. Today, we're doing the test pilot shots that are the vaccinations that are happening in our district, and from there they'll be going off. So that's some good news, and want to thank those people that put that work together. So I know we all need a little bit of good news, a little bit of hope, and so that hopefully that will be that's something that gives us
that's only for district employees.
District employees, thank you, Dan, very much for Davenport 1B district employees. Thank you very much. So with that being said, that's why we are changed our location today, because they're setting up shop inside of our boardroom. One of the things that the board asked us to bring forth is just an idea of a discussion of what would it look like if we were during an inclement weather day to move to have an online school day. So I asked Corey Guy to put together a team to review what that would look like, and she's here to kind of give us an overview of what that would look like, take any questions, and decide from there what direction the board would like to give us. So, Corey, take it away. You can take that off, I believe.
Okay. All right, well, thank you for letting me present to you tonight. Hopefully we can answer some questions. Prior to this meeting, I think on Friday, we provided you with 3 documents. The documents gave an overview of the plan for virtual instruction due to inclement weather. And in that plan, it talked about what would need to happen in this going forward if we were under hybrid, which will go until the February 12th. And then what would happen during 100% face-to-face instruction. I know we're talking about that a little later in the agenda. You were also provided with a schedule that outlined the schedule for elementary, junior high, and high school, as well as a staff expectation document. So the proposal, the overview of it is that we're proposing to use a virtual learning schedule by level to provide required student instruction during those days, inclement weather. And so I put those dates on there for you just so you know we're under hybrid till the 12th and face-to-face after the 15th. So rationale for that is that students and families are currently used to virtual learning days due to school closure. We've done that a couple times now. They're very used to logging in and utilizing that model. Would allow us to keep instructional days in the current term while the learning is happening. And we would not need to necessarily adjust terms for the end of year makeup days like we've done in traditional snow days. So some key points for consideration is that expectations for instruction would be communicated with all staff, students, and parents prior to, if this proposal goes forward. Instructional and non-instructional staff, so secretaries, paras, and would have assigned work for those days to support teachers, students, and families, and school building needs. The principal would do the key of giving them those expectations. But custodians and maintenance would still work, physically go to work on those days to deal with the inclement weather. Student start times have been delayed, and that was to allow families time to deal with weather-related issues, right? It's a little different when you have a large snowfall, are you going to be able to get up and get ready at 7:45? So it did have a little delayed start. We got that feedback from many different groups on that. Instructions for logging attendance would be provided to families and follow the similar procedures they do during school closure. So they would all log their attendance like they do during their hybrid off-site days. There's equity for teacher planning time across grade levels. We've examined that to ensure that we have a similar planning time. And synchronous instruction will be provided following the specific schedule based on grade levels. We would record those sessions, obviously, just like we did before during school closure, and those would be posted in Google Classroom. Small group sessions and teacher office hours are also a part of this, so if kids need additional assistance, they can log into those office hours. And planning time is built into the beginning of the day to help communicate any coverage and plans for any teacher absences, and also just ensuring that everything is up and running. Last point, there is a virtual inclement weather day would allow both online only students and face-to-face students to progress in their learning with teacher feedback. So currently we have students who are instructed, in 100% online. If we took the snow day, the teacher would have that day off, but students on the online platform would still be able to progress and do learning. They just wouldn't be getting teacher feedback during that day because it would be an off-contract day for the teacher. So this proposal allows for both, face-to-face and also online students to get just-in-time learning during the term and also get that feedback from their teachers. So I'll open it up to questions.
I guess you left everybody speechless. Director Beck.
I do have one question, and forgive me if this is super obvious and I just missed it. This applies to this year only, or any time that we might be on a modified schedule due to some sort of global pandemic, not in the future, like forever, or?
Well, it could be virtual snow days, and I would need to check on this, but I believe it was the Senate file that was passed for virtual learning. It was a part of that we could use, because prior to that, we were not allowed to do virtual learning because we couldn't ensure that students would be getting it, but that was passed. I don't know if that goes on past this year. I would have to check on that.
Okay.
Director Potts.
Could you repeat that part again? The teachers will be working or not working?
They're working on a virtual snow day.
Okay, I thought you said something that they.
So if we decided to do a traditional snow day, right? We would make it up at the end of the year.
Yeah.
Then that would be a non-contract day for teachers, and they just add it to the end of the year. Students in the online platform could still be accessing their learning, or they could take the day off as well. If they are accessing their learning at that time, they wouldn't have those connections from the teachers, right? If we had the traditional one.
I have another question. Have we talked to any districts that have done this to see what the percentage of kids on a snow day are going to do schoolwork?
I think it probably. I haven't.
I don't.
The answer to that would be
there's a psychological thing. It's snow day.
Sure. I think communication with this would be we'll have to ensure that we're communicating appropriately with all of our families, and teachers would want to communicate that as well with their students.
That'd be a good one to reach out to, because there's a couple of districts just to the north of us that did implement that. So
I'll just be.
it'd be interesting to reach out to see what they're.
To see. I mean, if it's like.
I think when the school board asked us to put this together, I think there's two things to keep in mind. One, we all know that we're capable of providing something online that would prevent us from extending into the school year farther or into the summer farther. But also the notion that of a snow day, that students might need a snow day, that staff and families might need a snow day. That the other piece of that is when you do make the snow days up, those are going to be face-to-face. So that's another thing that the school board needs to keep in mind. But we're obviously have the capabilities of providing a platform for us to do an inclement weather day. We called it an inclement weather day because all of us know that there's been ice days and fog days and things like that too. So, plus you never know what else could happen. So we went round and round what to call it, but we think you understand what inclement weather means to us. So.
Would this how would this impact the 2-hour late starts or that sort of a thing? Or 2-hour early dismissals because of inclement weather?
I think we'd still need those, because if we needed to get students out or give our county another hour or so to clear the roads or the city, I think we'd still need that. So I don't think that would impact this.
Director Klein.
I assume like junior high and high school kids, because they have to take their computers from class to class, that the computer would go home, they don't have a locker to leave it in. What about elementary kids? Do they tend to leave their computers behind at school, and how are we gonna know?
So actually, we just had a conversation about that. They don't leave their computers home. At school. They
Okay.
take their computers every day. And even if we went when we go to the face-to-face instruction, the direction would be still to bring in your computer home. Because you don't know if you're gonna be sick. You don't know if, a child might, need to be quarantined. There's all kinds of things. So the general pattern is, and the teacher librarians, the elementary teacher librarians, they were talking about how responsible the elementary students, because when this happened at first, oh no, they're not going to be able to do it, and they really are very responsible with it. It's just part of the regular procedures now. So to change that would be changing something that they're used to.
They're used to taking it home.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just had one question. Now, I know in the past, on days where there's snow days, kids aren't going to school, but a lot of parents don't get snow days from work, so they're still going to go to work. So if that child then has to go to some sort of last minute daycare and they don't have an internet access, that will keep up with what they're doing, what is in place for something like that?
So the attendance is marked in Infinite Campus, and at the elementary, the young kids, the parents can go into their parent portal and mark the attendance. But they also, one of the expectations is that the direct instruction, the synchronous instruction, would be posted in the Google Classroom. So if they needed to access it later in the day when the parent's available, it would be there for them.
Okay.
Director Hayes.
Currently, there's like the 4:30 calls that you go out to determine the snow days. How would that call work in this instance?
Typically, when bad weather's coming our way, we know sometime about within 24 hours that this is potentially coming. And so it would just be, I think one of the bullets is clearly communicate to all students and staff. One of those communication points was, get ready. Tomorrow's looking like we're getting a decent amount of snow. And we would need to communicate how that process works, because they're going to need their stuff, make sure they have everything before they leave that.
Okay, like Monday, it was going to be a bad day.
Exactly.
Okay,
Exactly.
thank you.
Director Pine.
I assume then if we have one of the inclement weather days, does that cancel all other things that are going on in the building and or athletic events, or is that going to be determined separately?
That's determined separately. So 90% of the time, 95% of the time, we cancel all things in the building, during the building up. Sometimes there are instances where we'll do a varsity only practice, those kinds of things. Or those are the things that we take individually. Or sometimes the roads are completely cleared off by 4 or 5 o'clock, and we might host a varsity only event. So those are some of the things that we decide as the day progresses.
Director Snyder.
I would assume, say, when your kids are like right now in the hybrid, they're maybe at one space in the curriculum. Kids that are online all the time using Ingenuity may be in a little bit different. So I would assume if we take a snow day, your Ingenuity kids would still be on Ingenuity. And so we're not expecting them all to be on the same page. Okay.
No, they would be still doing your 100% online. Students would be doing their curriculum, their 100% online curriculum.
Okay.
And if it happens from now until the 12th, your hybrid kids who were not coming to the school that day, they just progress like they normally do in their hybrid lessons. It's for the students that would be, the A's if it's a Monday, Tuesday, right? That they would be following this synchronous session.
all of the administrators, we have our ringer set to emergency contacts. And so I know that my children, when they call me, so if my children ever call during a board meeting and this thing goes off, it's one of my emergency contacts, the same thing as that, so. And as we're all parents, that's understandable, so.
Or maybe.
Totally understandable. No, that's
That's
okay.
why.
The last time that phone rang like that, it was a car accident, with one of her
that's
children,
right.
so. But it needs to be answered.
Yeah, thank
So
you.
anyway.
At least they're not asking where the cereal or popcorn.
Right. I think something else to consider in this is just if you've taught in a school and you know what it does to the learning when you put the 3 more days at the end of the year, right? What are those 3 more days at the end of the year? So this just-in-time learning, it's in the same term and you're not then having to adjust it all and you've got your seniors, who are they're going to graduate when they're going to graduate, but they're missing out on potentially some of that instruction. So it's another point to consider.
Director Snyder?
I was just getting ready to say, I'm not sure if we're soliciting like information here or feedback, but I think if we have the capabilities, I think it makes sense. Just as you said, teachers don't want to be there longer at the end of the year because those last days, especially making up for snow days, filling them with fluff or whatever. Students don't want to be there those extra few days. And if they can keep going and keep on pace and, without losing time, I think it's kind of a no-brainer to me, so.
So along those lines, go ahead, Director.
I just don't like the idea of adding one more virtual day. I'd like to see the kids 100% in the classroom, but to your point, as far as adding it on to the end of the school year, I know, we all know what happens. Okay, but it ends up being a wasted day, basically.
So you heard from 2 board members where they were at. What I wanted to do is get a sense of where everyone's at. And if you need more information or whatever, so you'd be comfortable voting on this one today. So Director Snyder and Director Posh have already stated. Director Klein-Jerome, where are you at?
Yeah, I'm good with it. I never liked snow days and I hated making them up at the end. So I think this is a good plan. I like the fact that it's all outlined. These are the times that you're going to meet with different groups and it looks like most people are accounted for. So there aren't some getting to sit home and really get a snow day while the rest of them are working. I think all bases have been covered, looks like. So yeah, I'm good with it.
Director Beck?
Yeah, as much as I love a snow day, at this time, this year, this is totally fine. I'd say we want to revisit it next year as we plan into the future because we're still going to have this capability and it may be something that we want to utilize in the future. I guess I would ask what provisions are made for the special ed students who are in school 100% of the time already, who for whatever reason their individualized services cannot be provided in a home setting very easily.
So they would follow the face-to-face, the schedule. So if they're 100% face-to-face already and it's prior to the, February 12th, then they would be following their schedule. We did put in additional certified staff that in these cases, SDI minutes and schedules would take some precedence on those days. And it could be that it overlapped with with another class's schedule. That's very hard to turn on a dime and say, well, on this day, this is your SDI schedule,
right,
based on the day and whatnot. So we
would likely have to make those up because part of the reason why they're coming to school every day is because they're not good candidates for online learning.
Right.
And so we would just make arrangements to make that time up or to increase the amount of instruction during a day or something. We would accommodate for that.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Director Hayes?
I'm okay with it. Our students have already lost countless hours of in-person learning anyway, so with this online, we're already set up for it. I don't know why we wouldn't utilize it.
Director Foster?
Yeah, I'm okay with it provided that we generated some data to find out a comparison data of, on a snow day, what kids are logging in as opposed to on a normal day when they would log in. Just to see if it's even worth it.
To do that.
Director Poston.
You know, along these same lines, and at some point, I'll make this as a board request, but I think there's some other occurrences where we may want to use the virtual learning, and I'll bring that up in a board request in the future.
Director Beck.
I was just gonna say, that, shoot, I totally lost my train of thought. I appreciate the planning that went into this and the fact that you've got prep time built in and, that the teachers have time to sort of shift gears and get their kids doing whatever needs to be done, because chances are they'd have a snow day also, or a virtual learning day, and that our students do as well, and they don't have to be there. The other thing I really, really appreciate is that the students who, as Director Snyder mentioned, may be in a situation because of daycare that do not have access are not going to be penalized for not being able to do that during that virtual snow day. I think that's really important.
Corey, could you tell me, what are TLC people doing during this time? Like innovators?
So the same support would happen. So some of them are co-teaching. They're providing support for, for the teachers, just as they would during prep time, right? Or during any day. So when we had school closure before, they had schedules and they keep their calendar, whether it's virtual or face-to-face. And we put in a larger plan for work expectations that, you would log your absence in ASOP, and that has to be communicated by the building principal, but there could be a case where you're fighting coverage and they're part of that rotation as well.
I'm good with it as well. I do want to thank everyone that worked on this, especially with starting the school year later, everything like that. We definitely don't want to extend the kids being in school longer than they necessarily want to be there. And I do appreciate you all accounting for all students and making sure if you need to add a little every day or whatever to make sure everybody's accounted for. So, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
No.
Thank you very much. We'll move on to the next item, the return to learn plan. Superintendent Schneckloff.
So, ahead of the pending legislation, which I believe was signed last Thursday, returning one of all school districts, giving parents, families 100% option to return to school. I believe that signed Thursday. That was signed last Thursday, which means we had to enact everything as soon as possible. But I will tell you, there are some health and safety. There were teams that were started this work. I believe everybody is represented here. We have our health and safety team. We have our academic standards team, our infrastructure team, social emotional behavioral health, and equity. And so all of those teams convened. I believe some of you were members of those teams. And basically the process that we did is we went and looked at the previous PowerPoint, the previous format that our families were familiar with, and our teams met and they brainstormed what's going to be necessary and what potential resources are necessary to come back. The teams are recommending that we come back in a 100% model. So 100% face-to-face or a 100% online model. And so we're going to roll through this PowerPoint. I'm going to go through this very quickly because it's very long, and then we're going to allow for questions because all of our teams are represented here. We also, brainstorming this over the weekend with President Goza, thought that it would be good to have some teachers in the audience. And so we have John Arnold from West, if you would just raise your hand. Kelly Ream from Williams, if you raise your hand. And Mitch Carter from Truman, if you raise your hand. So John's, we're out, so we have a high school, middle school, and elementary teacher perspective. So at any point, If you would like to ask any of these questions that you have to a teacher, we have that available, but also the leaders and administrators from our different return to learn plans. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. This should look familiar to you. When we are finished, this will be posted to our website for families to view and sent out. These things. Maybe it's off, Allison.
You want me to just do the,
Yes, please.
okay.
There we go. Introduction. Obviously, you can see the pages. Go ahead, Allison. I'm going to move very quickly. So if you wouldn't mind driving for me, that would
Yeah,
be great.
no problem.
So obviously, the purpose of what we're trying to do today is for the flexibility of our community. One of the things that I want to keep in mind is that as we move forward with this, our families will be interacting with their building principals. That's a key concept. And I would say that our building principals have really gone above and beyond to try and accommodate our families during a pandemic. And so that's going to be critical to us. Go ahead, Brenda.
Which one is, it's that one down, the down arrow. Thank you.
And here are our commitments. They're the same commitments that we had in the beginning, so you can read those as you go forward. Go ahead, Brenda. So key dates. So Governor Reynolds signed it on 29th. February 1st, an email was sent out to families notifying them of the different format changes. This week is the week that our families will be contacting their administrators and their building level staff to determine the learning format for their children. So the communication that's gone on is if you are a hybrid family, you're considered a 100% face-to-face family. So from there, you need to determine whether or not you're going to go from 100% face-to-face to 100% online, or 100% online to 100% face-to-face. From the 8th to the 12th, the school communicate with families regarding their schedules. And also during that week, our associate superintendents are going to be working with the buildings to see if there are any staff changes that we need based on those changes. And they've already been communicating with their building principals. And our building principals have a good grasp on, okay, who is it? They're beginning to contact their families. We thought that that was a better way to do that. What, Brenda? Go ahead. So here are our survey results. The survey that we did last week, and I'll give you guys an opportunity to look at that. This was sent to you, so I'm sure you have some questions over it. And there's a lot there. So I'll kind of let you guys take a look at it. And if you wouldn't mind, I would to hold them all at the end, because the people that are best to answer these questions are actually the experts of each one of those committees. But if you have something right in the middle, I will answer it, Dr. Beck.
Oh, no, I was just the model choice when it says stay face-to-face.
Yes.
Currently, we're in hybrid.
Yes.
So was the question actually remain in hybrid or go 100%?
No, it was actually, so the communication is our current hybrid model will not exist anymore. We will have a 100% face-to-face due to the challenges that prevents. So to stay face-to-face means that and so think about this in your mind, 100 or 100. You're 100% in school or 100% online.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the intent of that question.
Okay.
And so the data actually says that we're going to stay very similar, because some families decided from this survey to go to 100%, but we also got some families to come back from 100% online. And so we're very close to that 70-30, probably 75-25 maybe, mark. Next, Brenda. So obviously, and this is something we're not going to spend a lot of time on, because we know how to do 100% face-to-face school with some mitigation strategies. Next. So our online only, for grades K, secondary semester starts the 15th, 9 through 12, March 1st. You will have the option to return to 100% in-person learning model on February 15th at the start of the fourth quarter only. Families can choose to move their students to online learning at any time due to a health concern. So obviously, if you decide that you're going to come back and you think this is way too much for me, then that's when that decision can be made. Next. This graphic created by our curriculum department is very helpful to people because it gives you all the information on this presentation basically in a graphic. Next. Our preschool, business as usual. They've been face-to-face from the start of the year. And so basically business as usual for our preschools. Next. Again, those are original preschool information that our families are very aware of, but we wanted to make sure it was up there again. Keep going. Keep going. Okay, health and safety. So essentially when we come back full time, the key thing that we have to do is to maintain that we need to wear our masks at all times. And at the beginning of the year, we had so many talks about wearing our masks full time, and when we came back to school, it was almost a non-issue. It's something that we very rarely deal with. Our community understands how important that is. The thing that we're going to try and control is large gatherings, and we're going to try and utilize all of our space. And currently our sports are limited to a 30% capacity. Next. Recess, same thing. We're going to continue to cluster our students, minimize gatherings, wash the playgrounds down. All of those things are still there for recess. So our hallways, same. The thing that we want to impress upon our community right now is that the hallways, the recess, the lunchrooms, it's going to be very difficult to get 6 feet, almost impossible. And so that's where it's important to wear your mask. It's important to follow the guidelines if you've been in one of our high schools, there's arrows on the floor, there's up hallways, there's down hallways. We're going to utilize the spaces as much as we can. We're going to try and stagger our classes from going as much as we can at the different grade levels. But the fact of the matter is we're coming back 100% with probably 75% capacity in our buildings. We're not going to be able to get to 6 feet. So here's some more topics inside of our hallways. Next. Again, a lot of this is the same stuff from the beginning. We're just trying to hit on the highlights from before. So one of the things that we're going to continue to do is during passing time to prevent touching of surfaces and cleaning, we're going to prop our doors open. We've got different ways to continue to clean our desks with spray cleaners on the top. We're looking into purchasing wipes for students because we know now that this is an increased load for everybody. But this is something that utilizing seating charts is going to be absolutely critical because we know we're going to have to do more contact tracing now. And so knowing exactly where that child was and who they were around is going to be even more important. Next. The cafeteria. So the mitigation strategies that we have in place now, masks in line, we're going to get social distance while we are in line. The biggest discussion that we had was around this. And so right now our administrators are looking for spaces around the building and how they can adequately supervise those spaces. That's the number one thing that we're trying to do. Our buildings are big, but we have to be able to supervise the students as they eat. Mr. Snaden talks about bag lunches and talking about Rob throws out, well, maybe we could sit in the gym, but all of those things take supervision, and so that's exactly what we're looking into now. How can we utilize all of our spaces? We still have the appropriate table washing, hand sanitizing, all of those things going on, but the number one thing for us is once you pop those masks down, eat. Now, how can we utilize our space in our buildings? Next. Our facility cleaning, still the same thing. Hand sanitizers, all of those things are still those mitigating strategies. So we're obviously going to have an increased emphasis on that because we're utilizing more of the desks and more of the chairs. And so those are all things that we're going to have to take into context for. Next. This is still very important. If you have a temperature, don't come to school or don't come to work. And so that's exactly what that slide means. Yes, you should be taking your temperature in the morning. Hand washing, hand sanitizing, still stay the same. Face masks. This is, if you need a face mask, we will get you a face mask. But the masks and the maximizing the social distance is going to be absolutely critical. So one of the biggest things that we have concerns with is transportation, but inside of our buses, we're going to try and maximize. Again, you keep hearing me say the same words, but we have to give students a ride to school on the buses, and there's going to be a certain amount of students on the buses. And so limiting the number of students to a seat, ensuring that the buses are clean before and after are the things that we're going to continue to do. Arrivals and drop-offs, we're going to ask the same exact thing. Please stay in your car. Our buildings are good at this. If you've ever been out to one, I think President Goza and I were at Bluegrass one day, and we watched this happen beautifully, and everybody followed the rules. And so again, the designated drop-off times and locations, at first we asked that our buildings are going to need to be patient because this is absolutely going to be a little bit of an adjustment. So our water fountains are still going to be shut off. We're going to continue to use water bottles. We're going to ask students not to utilize share utensils. Non-visitors still, it's going to be very important that we limit and I think that the key word there is non-essential visitors. So that's what we needed to determine what is essential to running a building. The signage that's in our building is still in place. The great part about this is the hybrid model allowed us, go ahead, Brenda. The hybrid model allowed us to really practice our procedures so our students understand this. So for our students, it might not be that as big of an issue. This is the same. If your child's sick, keep them at home. These are the same. Drop off your students' items. They'll be picked up during passing times. Picking up students, exactly the same. Call 10 minutes prior. Entry into the building, a meeting, or conference. So this is going to be even more important to schedule appointments because our buildings are going to be slightly overwhelmed. And so to give our administrators and our secretaries a little bit more time will be very helpful. One of the things that I'm very proud of in our district is the process that was put in place for our 100% technology use in our district. We are turning that around at a very quick pace. I was recently in a superintendent's meeting where they talked about that was their biggest hurdle, and I know that we attacked that early on. So, next slide. And again, I want to just quickly review all of this stuff for you guys because I know it's fresh, or I know it was fresh in the beginning of the year, but this is again what's going to be being posted to the website. You can refer families to the website. This is still our process for setting up people in our district for internet access. We have an email that goes directly to Director Sloat. And we can get things moving as quick as possible. Again, we are a one-to-one district, so our devices, it haven't been that big of an issue. Obviously, for some they have been, but we're getting quick turnaround times on those devices. This will be all the contact points for our families. If they do have a technology issue. Go ahead. So, part of our health and safety, one of the things that we're going to talk about that when we get into the section where Dr. Klitsch is.
Mark?
Go ahead, yep. One of the things that our leaders did and continue to do is hold IEP meetings, and as the online modules adjust, they adjust those. And so we should be proud of the individualization that is occurring inside of our buildings and IEP team meetings in this arena. Same thing with our English language learners. In order to get our messages out, it's the process that goes out to get them translated is quite impressive. Next. We know and understand that when our students come back, and some of those students that have been online that we haven't laid eyes on, there's going to be issues that and in terms of social emotional behavioral health. And so our counselors, our building principals, they're ready to mobilize, and this is high on their alert systems right now. When we looked at this, probably the biggest change for us is that top bullet. We know that there's going to be anxiety as you enter into schools. And so we're set to have groups to work on that. You can ask more questions of Dr. Klipsch when that time comes. Again, this was as a result of one of President Goza's questions. You know, everything goes into parent portal and information's being sent out that way. Here's the different types of message. This is still the same. Those are all going to be the way that we communicate. Go ahead. So here are some additional strategies that we brainstormed. So this is really new information to the board. Hire and train additional staff. One of the things coming out of the health and safety is that through our hiring freeze, we might not have appropriate coverage, or we don't have appropriate coverage in our health offices. So if we do have to quarantine somebody, because of the hiring freeze, we are short nurses and we are short health paras. We also subs for our teachers and paras and custodians. So beefing and ramping that up. Josh talked about the need for additional furniture in open places to allow for lunch and things of that nature. We talked about purchasing plexiglass in areas where it is possible. Plexiglass was a big discussion, but plexiglass is not the same as a mask, but it can help. It's just a very expensive mitigation strategy. For us to put that in all of our cafeterias, we thought it would be better to try and distance. But we are looking at adding plexiglass to different locations inside of our classrooms, different places like that. So the way that, and we'll have more conversation about this, but the way that our semester ends, we're going to have some students that need to transition. So each one of our buildings is going to have to work with those students who are finishing up a specific class, either online, and they're going to have to come into the library to take that. But anybody that wants to come back 100% face-to-face, we're going to give it an option. But they might not have a class to be in or things like that. So we're working that out. We're having spots in the library or different places where students can come in and be supervised and get the help that they need. We are going to be providing with a pre-COVID bell and bus schedules, and we're going to have to make some changes in order to meet our bell requirements, which we'll talk about here a little bit. Or you'll have questions to ask. Obviously, this email is set up. I believe it was updated, Mike, for our return to learn questions to come through, and we've updated my email address on the website, Dan. It's appropriately spelled now. So I know that was a lot. It was a trip down memory lane for you, but there are some additional things. A lot of thought process went into verifying the things that are in there, because we are bringing our students back face to face, and that is that can be pretty scary for some of our community members, and it's pretty exciting for some of them as well. So with that being said, I've got Bill Schnaden is in charge of, will lead our health and safety. Jamie Weinsroll's here from HR, Jake with SEBH, Sandy with equity, Rob and Corey with infrastructure and return and academic standards. And then obviously our teachers, John, Kelly, intermediate, and Mitch at the elementary school. So with that being said, I threw a lot at you. Most of it you already know, but I want to offer up, now's the time to ask questions. And I ask anyone in those return to learn groups, please shout, be prepared to talk.
You're right, Klein, you're up.
Bill, I was on health and safety as well, but we never talked about indoor recess. How are we going to handle indoor recess? We talked about outdoor recess and limiting the classes. But if you got a bad day outside, 25, 30 kids in one room for recess,
It's gonna have to be set up the same way lunch would be, that idea of using multiple spaces and finding coverage. That's one of those additional comments we saw. How do we cover those extra spaces where we're gonna have to separate for lunch and recess? So
okay. And then my other question is, so I'm a student who decide I'm coming back in high school. It's high school. And so I come back on the 15th. And really, my next quarter doesn't start until the 1st. Within that 2-week period, I say, oh, this is not for me. Well, let's put it the other way. I'm online and for 2 weeks, and then I say, March 1st, I want to come back. We say you can't till 4th quarter. If you say February 15th, I'm not getting this out well. February 15th, and then you can change at the start of the 4th quarter only. But for high school kids, there's a 2-week period there that's the end of second term. Could they make a switch? Are we going to allow that for the March 1st?
So I think we would deal with those students. They would finish out their quarter of ingenuity. Now, if they want to come to the schools, we'll provide a library or a location for them to come because they want to be in school for any number of reasons, right? See their friends, and have access to MTSS, some different things. But we'd have the library established for them and let them finish out because they should be at the 7-week or 6-week period of that course and still have 2 additional weeks of work to do, rather than putting them into a brand new class for the last 2 weeks. And then we start them, it'll be the 3rd quarter on March 1st. They would start for 3rd quarter in their new block, their new schedules.
Okay, so they could work from home or they could find a place in a library.
Yeah, so if they said they'd rather just stay home, whatever, we would accommodate that because they feel like they want to finish out their online learning. We're providing the opportunity to come back right away, but we'd allow them to stay home and finish their ingenuity the last 2 weeks.
Because they still would be doing ingenuity during that 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Okay.
Director Beck.
I have 2 questions. So a parent asked me about this, that the legislation was requiring that we have 100% in person if it's offered, or we have to offer it to anybody who wants it. And I understand that we've had lots of people ask for it, so that was kind of, understood. But given the fact that teachers are already recording their classrooms for the hybrid students, I guess this parent was wondering why we can't still offer the hybrid model along with both 100% online and 100% in person. And maybe the teachers can speak to this because I don't know what it's like for you to have to record your classes for the days that are not in there. So I don't know. I just wanted to be able to give people an answer.
Yeah, sure. I can speak at the high school level. My experience is in science, and what we're trying to provide in our department is as much hands-on activity as we can when the kids are in class. So one thing that strikes me is that there's so much variation happening at different levels, different classrooms, different subjects, that it's really difficult to simplify that down to we could just switch, we could do both easily. In my experience, I tried to start with a linear schedule, the kids are going to do the same thing, and it's just okay, back to the drawing board, and we got to get hands-on because at home they're losing the time, and then you stagger everything, and then you try to clean up. It's been a year of plan change, and I mean the field is flexible. You have to be flexible in this field, but it's on a heightened level at this point, trying to keep up with. Especially there is a lack of engagement. There's one thing to make your video available. There's another thing to post additional resources, additional supports. But if we need buy-in on both ends, and frankly, there's a loss in that. And in my experience and in my colleagues' experience, it's a reoccurring theme that the kids, even if you make it available, it's not the same.
Hang on 1 second. Joe, are you able to hear with them being back there, or do you want me to have them come up to the table? Or people watching live stream can hear it?
If they came to the table, it's probably better.
Okay. If you're going to talk, could you come up to the table so that way we can get you, so the people watching live stream can hear you?
Okay.
You don't have to repeat everything you just said, though.
Thank you.
First of all, I appreciate that you are inviting us to, with our input. I say exactly what he said too. It's very difficult. I think it's going to be very difficult to navigate around a hybrid and a 100% in line. If the students are returning 100%, which is what is the best for our students, to be there 100%. The parents that I've talked to and the students that I've talked to, the concerns are about the closeness and social distancing and everything. They're still going to have those same classes as they're still, like if I have 24 in my class, they're going to just be 25th on Monday and Tuesday, and then, and every other Wednesday. And so they're still going to be put into those classes because we don't have the staffing to be able to say, here's the group of the hybrid kids that are going to come. Now here's your group of 100% in-person kids that are going to come. And as a math teacher, I teach pre-algebra, I teach algebra, and I also teach a section of 7th grade science. And I can tell you, algebra is, there are students that are accelerated. And just as an example, I had assignments posted online for the students on Thursday and Friday for last week that were not in person. And so today and tomorrow they will be, and 1 out of 19 students did the work. And these are algebra students that are supposed to be, so they're really not doing their work when they're hybrid. And so they're missing out on a lot. They need, I love that we're coming back 100% because these kids need to be in the building. And I know the logistics of it being social distancing and everything are going to be, but I've had that conversation with my students. I've asked them about anxiety levels and everything like that. Some of them are very concerned, and but they understand that they do have that option of going to 100% online if that is also the option. So my only concern with the whole thing is those students that are coming back from Edgenuity not going to be where our kids are, because I've already had some come back and they're lost. They haven't. It's not the same thing. So, but other than that, no. It's the having them back in the class anyways, even if it is just partial time, negates the whole germ thing. They're still going to be there. So,
Thank you.
Director Snyder, you had your hand up. I know, but you had your hand up and Director Foster had your hand up. You ran them down.
Yeah, my colleagues pretty much hit the nail on the head there. They explained most of what the concerns are, but specifically when it comes to why we wouldn't offer the hybrid in addition to the 100% face-to-face option, that's purely an infrastructure issue. We just do not have the resources to provide that. I do recognize that a lot of families have found some degree of flexibility that works really well for them in the hybrid. And I think that the schools are doing a great job kind of finding some of those opportunities for growth. But at this time, it would just be asking too much of teachers to have to balance a group of kids that are here every Monday and Tuesday and every Thursday, Friday, and Monday through Friday and online. And it becomes a point where teachers aren't able to offer the best services possible. And that doesn't serve our kids very well at all.
Okay. Well, that answers that question. Can I ask my second question, or you want me to wait?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Thank you very much. So my other question was, I've heard that in some cities and states where schools have returned face-to-face, a lot of the students of color are not returning anyway because their families have been hit the hardest with COVID-19 and other issues, just dealing with all sorts of issues. And so I'm just wondering, and they don't want to risk any exposure if they can help it. So I guess my question is, do we have families that are not 100% online, but that would not be comfortable coming back? Do we have people reaching out to these families that may be particularly reticent to coming back 100%? To make sure that we're welcoming them back in as safe a way as possible.
So
and I'm thinking particular of the people we don't usually hear from, right?
So that's a really good question. And when we started discussing what's the best way to engage with our families, That's why we asked our building level leaders to do it. So if you think of in those buildings where the teacher, the family involvement liaison, the principal, those people that know who's in their buildings, who should be coming back, who isn't coming back, and they're making those phone calls. So that's what's happening, going to begin to happen this week. And those that we don't hear from will be getting called by the Phil, the counselor, the social worker, things of that nature.
Okay.
So absolutely, the comfortability of people coming back into a 100% learning environment, we won't know that data until it actually happens. And so that's a good one to follow back up on, like, hey, what does the data look like for our students' attendance? All of those things will be very critical for us to see. And we're not alone. So all the other UENs are returning the same way. You know, when I looked at, I called out Waterloo, Sioux City, all of our Davenport, North Scott, Pleasant Valley, Muscatine are all returning in the same fashion. So we'll all have very similar conversation topics at the AEA superintendent's meeting. So it'll be a good one to discuss. You know, what are you noticing? What are you missing? What are the students coming off of this higher, lower? You know, so all of those things are things that need to be looked at, need to be discussed. So that's an excellent question. Our thought process was that the building administrators, the building levels, along with the leaders, would keep track of that, because if we have to adjust staffing patterns and things of that nature, we would.
Director Snyder?
Yeah, the main question I had was already talked about, and that was, you know, how did we land on just the 100% online and the 100% in person and no hybrid? But I've got a few other questions, sort of the same as, you know, one of the main reasons why we don't have the hybrid is just lack of staff. I mean, there's just not enough people to have all of those options. As far as our buses go, are we still running the same number of buses as if everybody was coming to school?
Yes.
So we still have all the same routes. So therefore, I mean, if we have, say, 30% less kids, that right there is going to free up some space on the buses.
Absolutely.
And some asked, the other question I heard was bell times. How come we're going back to
Longer days?
Longer days.
It's an excellent question. And our infrastructure team worked on that, and that was led by Rob and Corey, I believe.
Regards to the bell time, we currently, the state code through the hybrid is that they meet 15 hours during a 2-week period. And so we were meeting that and we tried to go to the minimum amount of time required so the teachers would have more time. With all the planning we knew that was going to be needed. As we go back to our full-time status, we have additional bell time hours that we have to meet. And so we've usually padded time on to each day throughout the course of 178 days. 10 minutes here and it all adds up, and which has allowed us not to make up a snow day at the end of the year or something like that. Well, we're behind now because the 180 days, we don't attend 180 student days. We have 178 in our calendar. So automatically we have to make up 12 hours right now from just these last 80 days. And so for us to do that, we're going to have to add those 10 minutes that we're adding on each day. Plus, if we go back to our Wednesday outs, that's an hour off of bell time. So now we don't meet the minimum on a Wednesday, so we make up those times on those other 4 days of the week. So the recommendation is to go back to traditional to get us back closer to the bell time so that we don't have to eliminate as many Wednesdays at the end of the year. We're going to have to look at amount of Wednesdays that we have to recoup at the end of the year to make that bell time. Now, the clarifying question we need to get from the state is, are we required to meet the entire 1,080 hours? Or is it just the 1,080 hours in percentage of the 80 days that we're going to be in? And so we have a follow-up question to the state about that. I think it's going to be the entire time, but if it's not, it could be a little bit less impactful. But to stay on the other schedule, we wouldn't have Wednesday early outs then for planning time and things like that, and we'd have to add some time onto the current schedule to start making up those hours. Kind of a long answer, but I want to give you the scope of it. It's a long equation to put together each year.
All right, thank you. And that answers another kind of a question I had, which was more because I got back on the board after the school year started. So my next question was going to be, I'm assuming we're on the 1,080 hours this year, and how did our online, or how is that affected with the 1,080 hours? And you kind of alluded to that we're a little behind right now. So as far as hours go.
So for example, if we had a 2-hour delay next week, those are hours that we lose that we'll have to gain back later in the year. So the flexibility, the local control, the hours are wonderful. In our current situation, it makes it a little more difficult to pick up some of those hours as we go in a shortened period. So I think about 80 calendar days we'll have when we come back to the schedule, 80, 85.
And I can only imagine that, with our start times at our schools needing to be somewhat strict because, again, bus routes, buses need time to get the kids, pick them up, get back, do their next run. I'm assuming nothing has changed there.
A lot of my communication with them is, if I add on time, I just need to make sure I add it on the end of each day, because then the buses are okay. I can't add it on the beginning of one level and on the end of another level, because then I do have the conflict of not having enough time to transition between routes.
Perfect. Thank you.
Director Hayes.
This is probably a Jamie question. For slide number 57, we talked about the hiring freeze and the need for nurses. Would we hire nurses temporarily, or what does that look like? How would we make sure that we have what we need, but yet stay within our budget?
All right, so we've been in.
Hold on a minute, come up here. We only got these speakers right here, so we gotta make sure everybody can hear you.
Sure. So
Or yell really loud.
we're actually starting those conversations because we've discussed temporary health paras, temporary nurses. So and having with the ESSER dollars that we've gotten, looking at supporting those with the ESSER dollars. So it's really Gina put together kind of where her gaps are. So she did that last week, so we can take a look at what we actually need and how we can address those gaps.
I think the next one is probably Jake for the anxiety. With that, I'm sure particularly if we have online students that are coming back full time, there will be an adjustment, and then our A's and B's when they're integrated together. I'm just wondering what that looks like. It's hard saying or hypothetically thinking, but with everyone in, and now with the normal day, is there someone that'll be available for counseling at all times, or how do you envision that?
Yeah, so that really will to your first point about students moving back from hybrid to online, or from 100% online to back in 100% in person. Our SCBH team did talk about that and the importance of teachers prepping students for that. Both the students they have in their class right now, as I believe Ms. Rain was saying, that hey, in a few weeks, our class size is going to be bigger. Let's review how this is going to work and be prepared for that, so it's not a surprise to them. And then when they all do come back, or for those percentages that do come back, it's like starting, some of those things from day one, starting from scratch again, talking about expectations and procedures and all of that. Our team did talk about the need for those additional supports. We do have, school-based therapists at almost all of our buildings. There's still some vacancies, and some have been more effective than others. But we've been working a lot with family resources also. We currently have virtual support groups for our students focusing on anxiety, depression, those types of things that is available, that those actually just started up in this new year. I believe actually our high school might have started just before, but I can't recall on that. So we have these support groups that are set up that students can log into and have facilitated by people from family resources. And actually, we're looking to actually have the same thing available for our staff. Probably tomorrow, I'm going to be sending out an interest survey because that came up in our group. Is that we need it for our students, and our staff have a lot of these same anxieties and stress with the life that we're living right now, and what can we do to support them so that they can best support the students also. That's we would love to have more social workers, more counselors, and but we have to work with the reality of that we currently have for staffing right now.
sounds almost like first day of school all over again.
Absolutely, yeah.
Thank you.
Director Snyder.
Speaking of substitutes, last I had heard the pool of substitutes was pretty slim, I guess. Is it still in that situation? Because I know all the districts in the area kind of pull from the same pool. And
so it's interesting. We are, I mean, on a daily basis almost, I'm processing new applications for subs. But we do from time to have sometimes more vacancies than we do people willing to come in and sub. I do know the other day I had Scott Community College reach out and they're doing sub-authorization classes, and they actually had students asking if they could come and do their sub-authorization student teaching at the district. So I'm trying to grab them as much as possible and volunteer to help them out. So I also know that we have been receiving some feedback that applications weren't getting processed. So I'm communicating to building principals. If you're getting that feedback, please come to me, because in some cases people aren't filling out the right, applying for the right position or filling out the application properly. So we're working with people on an individual basis to make sure that they're getting processed through. So it's tough when you have groups of 8 staff members going out at a time and
Sure.
have enough people, but I didn't look at, with the vaccine, we did offer those to all of our active subs that have been subbing in the district. So we got them participating as well.
Public service announcement. We need guest teachers.
Yes.
Sign up. So to answer your question, we always need guest teachers, and it's always an issue. And so I think they've changed the rules and regulations about the sub-authorization and
Yeah, so they reduced the age, paras can get their sub-authorization. You can have, we've had SSLs, so we've got some other people within the district that are current employees that are asking about getting their sub-authorization so they can help out in periods of time. And for paras, it's an increase in pay, but we're trying to utilize even what we have internally to fill some of those gaps.
On an average, how many subs are you short a day?
I'll have to look into that one.
thank you. That was one of my big concerns, because I'm excited to have kids back in the classroom, but if kids are back in the classroom and we don't have a teacher to teach them, it doesn't do any good. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, if anyone has anyone that's trying to apply and having any issues, bring them my way so we can help get those fixed and take down the barriers.
Thank you.
Director Baxter.
This is a pretty straightforward question, but it just occurred to me, I probably should have asked it in the fall, but it's more important now. To minimize movement, have we made sure that all students have a water bottle so they don't have to get up and go fill up their water? Is there a supply of water bottles that we can make sure that every student has one? Because that's kind of an important thing, and it may minimize the number of times that kids have to leave the room and move around. And along those lines, right now they're doing lunch in their classrooms, if I remember correctly, in some buildings anyway, on the hybrid model. And I'm guessing that isn't really feasible with the number of kids, or is there some way to sort of accommodate that or have more lunch periods than we used to, that kind of thing? How's that going to work?
I did a spot check on that because we were talking about the middle school and high school coming up with ideas, you know. And at the elementary, most of them are using multiple spaces, like the small gym. And some kids are sitting on the floor, they're sitting on folding chairs. Josh has been working with food service to talk about how we could prep meals differently, maybe a boxed lunch a couple days a week, anything that would cut down on the touch, if you will.
Yeah.
Some are eating in their classrooms, most of them are doing a combination of all three.
Okay.
Small number of kids in the cafeteria, eating in the classroom, eating in the small gym, auditoriums.
Okay.
They're spacing them out as much as they have people to.
Okay.
Now, this will be different when it doubles in size coming back. That's Josh banging at me, he's home listening.
But the intermediates and high schools are using the cafeteria.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about that, Rob might can talk about that, that's where we're getting our biggest, as TJ said, a lot of conversation around cafeteria. What do you do with all these high school kids that show up at the same time to eat lunch, who, don't have a paraeducator or somebody to cover for them, so they have to go eat lunch. Where at the elementary, they can make it work a little bit differently.
Well, and I guess given what we understand about how oftentimes it's restaurants, that are full to capacity that have been sort of places where spreading events have occurred. Cafeteria is basically a restaurant that's full to capacity. And so if we can avoid that at all costs, that would probably benefit all of us, especially at the high school level.
A little bit of the conversation that happened.
I wouldn't want to give any false hope around the cafeteria situation at the high school level. There'll be 1,200 kids at Central High School walking the hallways. That's outside of the 300 and some kids that are online. They're going to need to get lunch within a 2-hour period. If we were to stretch that lunch, even if we stretch it to 3 hours, now I've taken away 15 minutes of instructional time out of my first period, 15 minutes out of my second period, and 15 minutes out of my fourth period. I can stretch as long as I want, but I lose now science time. So it's an issue, and we're going to open up doors and try to go up, and maybe George Marshall's supervision is concerning. And not that they're going to do anything wrong. It's just garbage going to be, all over the place or anything like that. But you just need more bodies. There's really not that many people on duty in those times. Trying to pay teachers that are on prep times during that time to cover. If I get approval from that, to COVID dollars, something like that. But it's a concern at the high school. The middle school levels, the middle school principals will tell you they're worried about it too. My anxiety level is more at the high school because we lost the 6th grade. Now we have just 7th and 8th grade. So spreading them out, their cafeterias are built for more people, really 3 grade levels. So we seem to have a little bit more room in those. They're still going to have to use some other sites, but the high schools it is. It's just, and as I explained, whatever, extending the lunchtime just takes away academic time out of the other periods, which is a loss when I haven't been in my classrooms all year long. And so it's an issue. And they already are the longest period of the day. And so we talked about doing freshmen and sophomores eating, but really at the high school with our track of our kids, it's very, kids are taking sophomore to senior classes are very flexible. Our freshman classes are kind of self-contained, a lot of freshmen, but our sophomore through seniors, it could be any number of kids. So you can't just say all sophomores are eating now, all juniors. And if you have the entire summer to plan and individually schedule all kids, and I had a month to sit down, when you've got, normal business going on and then trying to pull and recreate everybody's schedule. And it makes a difference. I've got Mr. Potts as my social studies teacher, and then I'm going to redo my schedule. And now I've got Mr. Schneckloff. Wait a minute, my schedule said the whole time I've got Mr. Potts coming up. Why do I change my schedule? Do that for hundreds of kids. It's a lot. So we got to mitigate the best we can at the high school level. We have a commitment of the high school principals are going to do that. But I want to give true statements about what it is going to be. It's going to be one of the bigger things as the kids come back to us.
I appreciate your honesty on that front.
Director Snyder.
Well, I've got one other question while we're talking about lunch. Mine is lunch lines. What do lunch lines look like, say, elementary, middle school, and in high school? One of the concerns I have is with COVID protocols, everything takes longer. So if it's taking the kids longer to get their food, but they still got the same amount of time to eat it, do they have enough time to actually eat their food?
I would say at the high school level, the amount of time getting through, just stretching the line. If you think of Wood, there were 40 kids in line, and that would happen within 40 feet. Now they're all going to be all the way down a hallway, wrapped around the corner to keep them at that distance. And so who's supervising, supervising the line as it goes all. Williams could speak to that too. Everybody's kind of crammed in that little area, right? Now all of a sudden we're going to wrap that line all the way around to make sure everybody's 6 feet apart. I think the speed of the line will come through and they'll get their lunches and have the same amount of time. It's just how do we separate them in the line to that distance? It's going to be very difficult.
Well, with the idea of the box lunches, perhaps it's feasible to put up multiple distribution points so that you don't have one line, but you have several.
That's a really good point. Something I don't know that we have discussed as far as food service hiring additional workers so we could have more lines, because quite honestly, we used to have more I think back to the time of Central, we had different sites where you could eat at the Oasis, they called it, but we've closed those down and we have everybody coming through one entry point now. And so could more lines be opened at all of our secondary schools is a very good point, and something that I'll ask tomorrow.
The charge to all of our schools has been, this is our biggest issue.
Yeah.
If we don't stretch our students out and brainstorm how we're gonna do it, we're gonna be in a spot where we're quarantining quite a bit of students. And so that's the challenge that sits in front of our high school principals. And so right now where they are with us is they're saying this, I can do this, but if you allow me to put out a couple extra supervision spots and pay them over their prep time, I could get this accomplished. And those are very appropriate. So those are the kinds of things that they're brainstorming right now to close this gap. Because we know that if we pack them in the cafeteria, then we know what's going to happen. And particularly if they don't sit in the same spot, we know what's going to happen. So this notion of pods that we talked about in the beginning of the year is going to be critical. So all of those strategies, they're being asked to brainstorm, and it's going to be difficult. And we all know that 6 feet at all times, 1,200 students in a building is not going to happen. But our job is to maximize that. So when you're in line, you must wear your mask. You know, I know that in many of our places, they have the social distancing stickers on the floor. So they know exactly what that looks like. Bill, do you have anything you want to add to the elementaries in that?
Out of this whole conversation, I think the thing that's so critical, and this will come in communication, I'm sure, is we have to be really transparent with parents that they are not going to be able to be 6 feet apart. We'll social distance, everybody keeps saying as much as possible, the best we can. So I would comment on that. And then Al, I think Dr. Beck made a really good point. You know, the restaurant had to reduce to 50% capacity. So should the expectation be that our cafeterias will operate at a percentage of their capacity and force us to find other ways to serve those kids? Because that is where Gina tells us we're gonna have our biggest issues. And then she has to quarantine them. And then if you don't sit in the same seat, how is she gonna know who to quarantine? She has some real concerns about cafeterias, and I think we have to be really upfront with parents that that's really gonna be kind of our hot spot right now until we come up with a plan.
So the strategy is that our principals are meeting and they're talking about how can they get, because space is everything. So what's the way to maximize the space that we can get?
Well, here's my other suggestion. Event tent. Get one of those big event tents. Back it up to the cafeteria so you got an extra room now. Just kidding.
Well, they have one of those at North. You got a field house out there.
You could use that.
Exactly.
No, that's exactly what they're going to be thinking about.
Yes.
So.
Director Poston.
Are there funds available to hire additional staff to?
So yes, we can use ESSER funds in this instance. The problem that we have is that, are they temporary or not? And that's what Jamie's working through, because if we hire staff and they're on, then we would have to reduce them later when the need isn't there to supervise. But yes, it is appropriate to hire staff to do that.
But it's going to be kind of like trying to find substitute teachers. You're probably not going to have an easy time finding those people.
You know, you think about hiring somebody to do the supervision in the hot spot in a school, that probably will be.
Who doesn't know any of the kids?
It should come with a tie-back suit and
Welcome.
I was just gonna say, that's where Mr. Scott shared that, you know, perhaps you could hire a teacher to come pay them to do an extra supervision, you know, out of their prep period or something like that. That might be the quickest.
Sometimes it's very popular for a teacher to get to pick up a little extra money, say, yeah, I will cover that over my prep time. And so.
And they know what they're getting into.
And that could be covered through that extra funding.
Yes, it can be.
What about like these teachers that are retiring in February? Would they be?
I ask you that about every 6 hours.
Okay, let me. I've talked about this so much. Okay, so the governor's proclamation waived the IBERS restriction. However, what we find is an issue with the Affordable Cares Act with our health insurance. So even if there's no way to have the retirees sign off that they wouldn't take our insurance, we would be obligated within a period of time, we would be obligated to still provide them the insurance. So then that takes away from the estimated cost savings that Gary Sinclair has. So it comes around the Affordable Cares Act piece and our obligation as a district to provide the health insurance. So we got around the IPERS piece, but.
Even if they're part-time?
Yeah, as soon as they're employed back with the district, even as a sub, they're considered as employed, then we're required.
Couldn't they be paid out of those COVID dollars though? It wouldn't have to come out of Gary's budget reductions?
But the budget reduction,
This is one of Bill's questions every 6 hours.
I know. He keeps coming to me like I'm gonna change my mind. He's gonna ask it a different way.
I mean, could the insurance be paid for also out of the COVID money?
We would have to talk to Lisa Cruz or Gary, and I don't know as much about the ESSER dollars and what could or could not.
We'll get an answer. That's a good part.
Yeah.
I mean, if you paid them both their salary and their benefits out of there, they might be.
Yeah, see? Look into that.
And actually, on that line, I know we got a pretty good chunk of money through that. Is it enough to support all the things that we've been talking about? Yeah?
Well, we want to be very careful with those dollars because we want to maximize. We want to close the gaps for students.
Yes.
We want to do all of those things. So it's very important that that is the forefront. Now, to have a safe environment for students to come to school is also, to provide mitigating strategies is also. So it's very appropriate to do all of the things that we talked about.
Okay.
Director Snyder.
I got 2 more questions and then I'll hush.
Very appropriate term with your mask.
Earlier in the conversation, we had talked about technology and that there's plenty of Chromebooks. We are a 1-to-1 district, and I'm thinking, well, that's 14,500 kids. I think one day when I was up in the IT room, there was like 13,000 of those 14,000 in there to be fixed. How many, how are we sitting with extra Chromebooks so that if kids would have, to trade theirs in, do we still have plenty to swap them out?
Scary? No, that came up at our meeting today. Corey's still here. And we're good. He says we're adequately able to handle what appears to be a lot of issued Chromebooks, but.
And I think it's important to notice that Dr. Beck, to build on that, Dr. Beck, you were working off of a Chromebook the other day. And so the teachers are issued, I believe, that Chromebook. So it's much easier to navigate multiple screens and do things that a teacher has to do outside of what a student has to do. So that's one change so our teachers have that available to them.
If Gary was here, he would also talk about we're doing away with blue Acer Chromebooks, which have a lot of breakage. And so some you might have seen that, and so those are going away, and we're getting a more robust.
So to repeat what Corey said is that we have a stock of Chromebooks that are more susceptible to be broken, and we're bringing in a much better product that is tougher.
Thank you. I had one more, but I can't think of what it is, so.
No one has anything else? First, I would like to thank everybody for coming and participating in this. TJ and I talked over the weekend, and we thought it was very important to get the teachers here to get their perspectives for your prep times and everything, because I know it's a lot on your plate. And secondly, about getting this set up so it can be live streamed. So I want to thank Joe and Mary for making that happen and getting this done, because it was a very important discussion that needed to be live streamed. I had a couple questions. You had talked about busing. Is there a way to put dividers in the buses so you can get a good number of kids in there?
Like plexiglass dividers?
Sure.
Was that ever discussed, Bill?
No, we set up a schedule where we can run the existing routes with no more than 2 kids to a seat, which is what our neighboring districts are doing. And they're already running the same, they kept running the route during the hybrid time frame, because different kids would get on different days. Nobody ever talked about plexiglass dividers, skipping seats on the bus, putting siblings 3 to a seat if needed, but everybody else would be 2 to a seat was the last. I don't know what the divider would amount to.
And the ventilation would be.
Open the windows, yeah.
important.
Right. Along the dividers line, I know you had said plexiglass is pretty expensive and stuff. Is there like an option that some of our schools that have 3D printers are capable of doing that? Because I know they make face shields and things like that, so I think that'd be a cool project for some of the kids to work on. I didn't know if that was discussed or not.
We have talked about purchasing plexiglass, and I think right now we're not sure that it would be as effective inside the cafeteria as we would like it to be, but we're still investigating it. We have not talked about utilizing our students and our 3D printers to provide some of that stuff, or our CTE classes and some of our other shops that we have to utilize that. So that'd be a good idea to reach out to them for that. Because I know right now, if you see those plexiglass dividers, that would be, especially the talent we have inside some of our CTE programs, would be something they would be definitely capable of doing.
Okay. And my other question, I think you touched on a little bit, but I'm thinking you would almost have to double up all your custodians, right? Because they're going to have to be, there's more kids in the room, you're going to have to be cleaning up a lot more. If you move those lunch rooms out and you put them in different areas, they're going to have to clean all that. I mean, you certainly can't expect the teacher, parent, whoever else to do that.
That's on our return to learn plan for custodial, to give Joe, in fact, he's working on it now, trying to get a larger pool of custodians that he could call on to support lunch and during the day. And it would show up on that list that you were talking about earlier, where nurses, custodial substitute custodians, lunchroom supervisors. So that's how those would be funded or paid for.
Okay.
He's looking at that now.
Okay. And again, I just want to thank all of our staff, because it's going to be a huge task for everybody, down to a building secretary who's going to have to be answering that phone all the time when the parents are calling and stuff like that. I appreciate everybody taking the time, hold on one sec, to participate in the return to learns and getting all that stuff. I know it was a huge task, and again, I really want to thank the teachers for showing up tonight at each level on short notice, so we do appreciate that. Director Snyder.
I thought of the last question I had. Dan's question triggered that. In the presentation, it talked about cleaning the rooms between classes. Teachers, I know in between classes, a lot of times they have hallway duties, they have different things. What is in place to give these teachers time to clean the rooms, or are they going to, is it going to be as a student comes in, grab a Clorox wipe down your desk? And then my next question is, I would certainly hope that we're not leaning on these teachers to provide their own materials, because pre-COVID days, they brought their own Kleenex, they bring their own Windex, they bring their own stuff, but we're using those materials now at such a huge rate that, and I want to make sure that they have plenty available and that they know where to get them from.
Yeah, I saw the spreadsheet today, and those things have been taken to order. The idea was left that they would have both options available, you call them Clorox, the individual pull-out thing available, or currently they're using a spray bottle that they've all been given, and towels that get cleaned on a regular, I think they're blue towels or something, but they have 2 towels in their classroom that they put in a certain spot and they get cleaned and the new ones come in. And so both options are going to be available, and see which is the most productive. But some of those middle school teachers are going to have a lot of desks to wipe down, in high school when they leave every period and a new group comes in. The elementary, it's not quite so much, because the kids will stay in the classroom and they'll sit in their same seat for most of the day. But both those options are being explored right now to see which is the easiest for teachers to take care of.
Well, and didn't they say at the preschool level, there's a spray you spray on and within 30 seconds, it's dry. You don't even have to wipe it off. So that was also an option we talked about.
But teachers are gonna have time to do, I mean, with their other tasks. I mean, it seems like teachers never have enough time, but you know, they have lunchroom duty, they have hallway duty. Where is that time gonna come from to clean those desks after each class?
That's what created all the enthusiasm around the Clorox wipe, because the student could pull one out, wipe down his own desk, throw it away and sit down. And then the teacher wouldn't be at that task every.
Okay.
That's why they were interested in those wipes at the time.
Sure.
Very expensive. But
Very.
Oh, I know.
It's so's teacher's time, right? And Rob, we talked about their need to be in the hallway for
Always supervision
supervision.
is very important,
Oh, yeah.
very important.
And a bathroom break once in a while is always
Well,
nice.
I guess, yeah.
Doesn't
Again, no, it
Hang on a second. I know both of the teachers wanted to add something. If you guys want to step over here and add what you wanted to
Yeah,
say
I was just gonna
before
say,
everybody
I mean,
talks
you
over
know,
you.
we feel like we're drowning already, you know, I mean, with this whole, and then even with the potential hybrid, you know, the parents wanting hybrid and 100%, you know, but I mean, I know that I go and every time that Sam's or any place has Clorox wipes, I buy my own. And, you know, the thing is you're spray, and right now I'm only doing half my desk, you know, and so there's teachers that are gonna have 34 kids in there, and there's no way to get that done in 3 minutes, you know, I mean, it's just impossible. So, I mean, like I said, we're struggling already with trying to manage everything and hallway duty.
Did you have something you wanted to add?
Most of it was covered with the blue wipes, and like our at West, we have the spray available and we get the clean towels, but you know, it's also recommended that it sits, you know, for 5 minutes for maximum efficacy, and you know, only 5 minutes, and like you say, things come up, kids, like, we don't just like have that full 5 minutes between blocks just to clean. So it's a challenge. I mean, it's something we'll, as far as I can tell, everyone's willing to, you know, do what they can, but it's just the juggling. It's hard to comprehend, but we'll make do and do the best we can. Clorox wipes sound wasteful as well. I mean, that's a lot of waste and expense. But we'll do what we gotta do.
Hold on one second. Did you have something you wanted to add before I cut you off?
No, cleaning the desks, cleaning those tops, it's just gonna take time. And it has to be, we are in a pandemic. This has never been experienced before. So for you know what we need to do? We need to stand at our door. We need to greet our students. We need to come in and we need to clean our desks. And whatever method that we provide is exactly what we need to do. But we also need to be able to look at ourselves and say, it's okay, we're in a pandemic. I can eat a box lunch in George Marshall Gym. I can sit at my desk and I can wait until my desk is clean. Those are the things that we cannot lose sight of, that the pressure of every minute, because as a teacher, as a principal, and understanding that, every minute counts when you're working with somebody who is trying to get into Harvard or is at risk. Every second counts. But so does safety first. So stand at the door, greet your students, tell them how much you care about them and how glad you are that they're there. Listen to any concern that they have. Clean your desks the best way that fits your classroom and start your day. Start your time with those students. And those options are going to be available. And that's what we need to make sure. I remember having these conversations about masks and about what are we going to do when they don't work. And they got to school, and for the most part, they wore them because they knew what was important. And for our desks to be clean, they want their desks clean too. And so they're going to make sure that they're stepping up too. So I want to really impress on this pandemic time. This is happening at a rate that we can't make all of these decisions the best way that we want to. You've heard us all say, if we had the summer plan for this, we'd knock this out of the park. We don't. And so that's the message you just heard, is what we need to make sure that we're telling our students and families and teachers. So that's what I wanted to say to that.
See how important you guys are? I cut the superintendent off in mid-sentence to acknowledge. Director Beck.
Well, I was just gonna say, as a scientist, from what I understand about transmission too, surfaces are not as much of a source of transmission as actually breathing on people, right? So personally, I don't worry as much about sitting down where somebody has been. I prefer it to be wiped down, but I consider that a fairly low-risk activity. That being said, I carry hand sanitizer with me all the time, and I use it all the time. And so maybe one other way that maybe isn't so wasteful and may cost less is to make sure that every student has access to hand sanitizer when they sit down at their desk. Give them a pump, or when they come in, there's a thing by the door, or whatever, or they all have one in their pocket. I'll go buy a bulk supply of it if that's what it takes, but that's another thing that we can do. But I think it's important what you said. We got to put it in perspective. Waiting an extra 5 minutes for that desk to dry is maybe, if that's what it takes to help everyone feel comfortable, then that's what needs to happen before we dive into, because they're not going to be able to learn if they're sitting there really worried about touching their desk or something like that. But we also want you guys to feel comfortable as well. And so it's important that you don't spend hours and hours stressing about it. I know you will. You're going to, but whatever we as a board can do to help alleviate that is let us know.
Dr. Beck, do you have a guest teaching license by any chance?
I do not.
Okay.
I would come in if I could.
Have my license. Oh, maybe, no, I don't.
Did anyone have anything else? Is there any additional information you would need before this would be presented to us at a board meeting? So you'd be comfortable moving forward with it?
But this is going on the website tonight, tomorrow morning, first thing, so parents know, okay? Yeah, I'm good with it.
Good. I'm
Yep.
seeing a lot of bobbleheads in the room. All right. Did you have anything else? Did anyone have anything else you wanted to add?
Includes our presentation.
That's it. I like it. All right. Again, thank you to everyone that showed up tonight. Thank you to all the parents that sent us emails over the weekend. We do get those. And that's why we made sure we were able to get this live streamed and to try to get some of your answers or your questions answered, especially with not being able to do the 3 models. It's too hard. It's too much to ask of our staff. We don't have enough staff or space to do that. It's no can do. So with that, I will ask for a motion to adjourn. So we'll second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.